What's going on, YouTube? Welcome to another episode of Ahead of the Game Podcast. We got another reaction for you guys of this wild week of football, week 5. Don't forget to like, subscribe, make sure notifications are on. And then let's get right into it, man. Let's talk about these Baltimore Ravens. At this point, I think they quit. I think they quit defensively, and I think offensively with Cooper Rush in there, you almost have no shot, and I think they quit. I'm not saying that Harbaugh should be on the hot seat, but at this point, I've never seen a Ravens team this bad before. I'm 30 years old. I've never seen a Ravens team this bad. Like, they've had some okay seasons, but this bad, I've never seen them this bad. And I probably think it's probably time for a new voice in there. And I'm not trying to call for Harbaugh's job, but at this point, if it's this bad, and watching this game, the players quit. They quit. You're going up against a Houston Texans team that really couldn't get anything going on the ground. They have a makeshift offensive line that really hasn't been together, and they really did anything they wanted. CJ Stroud had all the time in the world to just carve you guys apart, and I think it's because they quit. Again, you could say Roquan Smith was out, Kyle Hamilton was out. I don't know how to pronounce the guy's name. Matabike, I think is his name. Excuse me if I pronounced that wrong. But you could say all that, but you have a roster for a reason. You have players for a reason. You build your team just in case injuries happen, and to get 40 put on you, it's not because the 3 players were out. It's because they ultimately quit. And again, I wasn't expecting the Ravens to come out and put up 30 points with Cooper Rush at quarterback, and I didn't expect that. But again, I don't expect the offense to give Derrick Henry 13 rushes or 13 carries or how many it was. This was a poorly coached game, offensively and defensively. Offensively, your star quarterback is out. What do you ride? The run game. You didn't do that. Defensively, you have a lot of guys out, and you don't do anything different. You still put out these light boxes. You still put out all these defensive backs out there. You're still running a nickel defense. You're still putting all these defensive backs out there. You still have a light box in with your front 7, and you're gonna get you got 40 put on you. And for me, if watching this game, it was like they quit. It was really looked like they quit when they couldn't really stop the Texans. They pretty much quit and gave up. And again, I'm not calling for Harbaugh's job, but I think you're never going to get a better coach than a Hall of Fame coach, and he is a Hall of Fame coach. But at a certain point, you got to move on from legacy. You know what I mean? You have to move on from, what he's done and what he hasn't done. You know what I mean? This team is always a good regular season team, but they can never get over the hump. And I think that's coaching. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that, they should blow it up or anything like that, but they do need to retool this roster, and they do need to get a lot more physical. I've never seen a Ravens team in my 30 years not be physical. And today they pretty much got bullied. Physically, they got out physical offense on both sides of the ball, and they got their will taken from them today. And to do that in Baltimore, at home, it says a lot about the team. I think the team quit. That's just my opinion. I think this team quit. And regular season, they always win 13, 14 games, but when they get to the playoffs, they fail. I think this team they're not together. They lack the leadership. They always have leadership, but I think they lack the leadership with this team, and I just don't know where they go. Honestly, from this point, you're 1-4. Lamar Jackson is probably out 2 more weeks. Do you shut him down? Do you shut a lot of your starters down? Do you shut your all-pros down? Because who knows how they're going to look. I mean, if you got 40 put on you by the Texans, you don't know what's going to happen these next couple games. And for the Ravens, I don't know where they go. You know what I mean? It's going to be a lot of questions in the offseason. And again, depending on how long Lamar Jackson is out, this Ravens team, if they can get it together, they can rattle off 10 straight games. We never know. It's only week 5, but again, the way that they played today, I think that they quit. I'm giving the Ravens the benefit of the doubt because they've always been good, and they got number 8 still in that building. So who knows? But for the Texans, this was a hell of a win. This was a hell of a bounce back, and I think they have their identity. They have their coach, they have their quarterback. I just think this roster needs to be retooled offensive line wise. I think if they get a consistent offensive line, they'll do a lot better. This defense is crazy. I don't have enough to say about the defense when you got Will Johnson and Danielle Hunter on the edge and Petrie in the slot and Stingley and them boys. The defense is crazy good. So I think if they get a consistent push from the O-line and give CJ Stroud some time, he can actually, bounce back from these last couple games that he's been going through. But again, this was a Baltimore Ravens that I've never seen before. I've never seen I've never seen a Baltimore Ravens team look like this. I really haven't. I think the Baltimore Ravens are probably going to have to retool. I'm not saying Harbaugh should lose his job, but at this point, I don't know. You know what I mean? But let's talk about the Broncos and the Eagles. The Broncos finally got their staple win, and it wasn't pretty. They were down 17-0, I believe, or 17-3, and they came back and they got the win. But watching this game for the Eagles, again, the Eagles and the offense, it looks hard. Everything looks so hard. It looks like if they're not running the ball, gashing the run, and they got to draw back and pass, everything looks hard. AJ Brown runs 3 routes. Slant, a dig, a out, and a sluggo. Let's do 4 routes. A sluggo is a double move, but he runs those routes: a slant, a out, or a go ball, or a double move, whatever you want to call it. And watching this, it's painful to watch because they have so much talent that this team really, they just won a Super Bowl, and the offense looks hard. If it's not Saquon Barkley running the ball for 100+ yards, it really looks hard. And I'm not blaming Jalen Hurts. Again, I'm not going to blame anybody, but again, he has another offensive coordinator. This is like his 5th or 6th different offensive coordinator that he's had, and he has to deal with. You go from Kellen Moore to Shane Steichen. I don't know the other guy's name. I forgot his name, but this is like his 3rd or 4th offensive coordinator. You know what I mean? And everything just looks hard, and they were up in the game, but again, the Broncos said, let's stop the run, put the ball in his hand, and let's see. And because it got to a point where if they're not throwing the ball deep, they can't complete a pass. That's where it got to. If they weren't completing a deep shot, they weren't completing the pass, because the Broncos went man-to-man right in your face. They were not going to let you get anything underneath. They were stopping the slant routes. They were stopping everything short. They made him really pass the ball in these tight windows. And again, that's why I said AJ Brown only really runs 3 routes, because they were trying to run slant routes. They were trying to run the over routes, but the Broncos said, no, we're going to go man-to-man, press man-to-man, and you're going to have to run something else. And again, they held them to 0 points. They had 0 points in the second half. They had 17 in the first, nothing in the second. And for the Eagles, they're 4-1. They're a hell of a team. But again, I think everything looks hard, and I think they need to go back to the drawing board. They have everything you need to be successful, except I think they need to go to the drawing board and make stuff a little bit more, mix things up a little bit more. If it's not a deep ball, or if it's not Saquon rushing for 100+ yards, it seems hard. You know what I mean? And for the Broncos, this was a staple win for Sean Payton, because this game was all about coaching. This game was all about coaching. Bo Nix struggled in the first 2.5 quarters, 3 quarters, until he got going. And I think it's all about Sean Payton. Sean Payton didn't abandon the run when he was down. He kept running the ball, and he was wearing on the Eagles defense. And Bo Nix made some big throws. He made some big time throws. You know what I mean? Those big throws to Cortland Sutton, those big throws to Evan Ingram really changed the dynamic of this game. And for Sean Payton to go for 2 instead of tying the game up, I still don't know what that was about. He goes for 2 instead of tying the game up. I don't know what that was about, but that's why he's one of the greatest head coaches ever. And again, the Broncos get a staple win, and the Broncos are scary. They're a scary team because of their defense. They get to the quarterback. They get to their quarterback rushing 4, and they can send a blitz and get to your quarterback as well. I think the Broncos, they're still figuring it out. how to really gel together. But I think, they're going to be a scary team. They're one of the scary teams in the AFC. And it's all about Sean Payton, man. Sean Payton is coaching his team and coaching his young quarterback to really get things going. Let's talk about these Cowboys, man. I'm going to keep this short. Let's talk about these Cowboys. The goddamn Cowboys are putting up 40 points, 30 to 40 points a goddamn game. What can I say? Dak Prescott is an MVP candidate. He has these boys playing. Maybe Schottenheimer, maybe he was the right coach. You know what I mean? Maybe he was the right pick. Nobody wanted to give them credit. But let's talk about the Cowboys, man. The Cowboys are really a team to be reckoned with. Their defense can't stop anybody, but if you give them the ball back, it's hard to stop them. Their defense is they can't stop a motherfucking soul. But if that defense causes a turnover, the Cowboys can score the ball. They can run the ball. They can score the ball. Dak is an MVP candidate right now. And if they win at least 9-10 games, I think he'll win the MVP this year. Because he is playing out of his mind. And mind you, this is without CeeDee Lamb. He is playing out of his mind right now. And I can't say enough about them. But for the Jets, 0-5 start. Aaron Glenn shouldn't be on the hot seat. I get that he preached this discipline and all this. And how picture this. You're a new guy on a new job and you're trying to preach, you're trying to get your mentality into these players that you're coming into. You know what I mean? And for the Jets, I just think another year or two they'll be in the right path, but right now they're undisciplined. They shoot themselves in the foot, and it's not just one player. For watching the Jets, it's not just one player. It's really not just one player that you can definitively say he's the reason why. It's a whole team. They fumble the ball. They are undisciplined on offense, and defensively, they give up too many chunk plays. That's the thing that's wrong with them. They give up too many chunk plays defensively, and that hurts them a lot because they have a good front four. They just can't get to the quarterback because their back end is just giving up everything. You know what I mean? And even in man-to-man, it's hard for them to stick to man-to-man because, other than Sauce, they really don't have the guys to do it. But yeah, for the Cowboys, I think Dak is going to win the MVP if he keeps playing like this. And for the Jets, I think they need to start building in the right, Aaron Glenn needs to get his mentality into his own players and not these players that he came into the team with. One game I want to talk about are the Buccaneers and the Seahawks. This was probably the most entertaining game because this was a shootout back and forth. Sam Darnold versus Baker Mayfield. Emeka Egbuka versus Jackson Smith and Jigba. This was one of my favorite games because this proves that you never know what's going to happen in the NFL. And one thing, if you think that Emeka Egbuka and Jackson Smith and Jigba are good, can you just imagine how good Jeremiah Smith is? Can you imagine that if these guys plus Marvin Harrison, Olave, Garrett Will, can you imagine this guy was a freshman, right? Doing some crazy things. Can you imagine how good Jeremiah Smith is going to be coming out of Ohio State? That's all I was thinking about this game. Because those two guys were going back and forth, and I was just thinking, I was like, God damn, if these two guys are like this, or all these guys around Ohio State are this good, just imagine how good Jeremiah Smith is if he goes to the right goddamn program or if he goes to the right organization. That's all I was thinking. But this was a shootout. Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, they both put on the show. And for Sam Darnold, that interception, that's just how the ball bounces. You could be mad, you could be upset, but the ball bounced off a guy's helmet and it bounced right to a Buccaneer. But if I'm a Seahawk fan, I have nothing to be worried about. This is a recipe for success. This right here, you have your quarterback, you have your running backs, you have your wide receivers right now. You have everything you need to be successful. You just need to come together and blend it, and they do that. It's just the luck of the ball bouncing the Buccaneers' way. You know what I'm saying? And for the Bucs, Baker Mayfield is entering a tier of quarterback that I think he's getting to that, or I think he's in that elite quarterback tier, because now for Baker Mayfield, every time he gets the ball, with a minute or some change left and he needs to go tie it or win it, I think everybody knows now he's going to do it. And that's a different tier of quarterback. Every time Mahomes gets that ball back, everybody's like, okay, he's going to do it. I think Baker Mayfield is in that tier of if he gets that ball back, he's going to march his team down and get a score, no matter if it's a field goal or if it's a touchdown. I think Baker Mayfield is reaching that tier in quarterback because he's done it. I think this is 4 weeks in a row now, 5 weeks in a row where he's taken his team down and got the tying score or took the lead. And for both of these teams, you can't really say too much because it's a shootout and one team made one mistake and one team didn't. You know, Sam Darnold threw an interception. It wasn't a terrible interception where it was double coverage. The ball just bounced in the Buccaneers' way. You know what I'm saying? Excuse me. Got the games on my phone. And I just think that's what it is with the Bucs and the Seahawks. You know what I mean? I just think that these two teams are on the way. They're on their way. I think the Bucs are Super Bowl contenders, and I think the Seahawks with Sam Darnold, they have everything they need. They have the quarterback, they have the running backs, they have the receivers, and they have the defense. I think everything just needs to come together where they can be like a well-oiled machine and they can play complementary football, offense, defense, special teams. Another game I want to talk about is the Commanders and the Chargers. I didn't know how well coached the Commanders were until my Raiders played them. Because they really have Jaden Daniels and really just Deebo Samuel on offense that you really know. That the names that you really know are really two names that you know. But defensively and offensively, they play complementary football. And I think for the Commanders, Quinn lets Cliff Kingsbury run the offense. I think he literally lets him control the offense. He controls the defense. Kind of like what the Chiefs do with Spags and Andy Reid. Spags, you do what you do. You know, I think that Quinn is letting Cliff Kingsbury do that because defensively, they're a well-oiled machine. They play complementary football to the offense, and they're a well-coached bunch because even without Jaden Daniels, they still put up points. They still put up 30 or 40 points, and that's because I think that Cliff Kingsbury, he controls every movement on that offense, and Quinn lets him do what he has to do. And I think that they are a very well-coached team because you got Luke McCaffrey over there and Zach Ertz, and I don't really know anybody on that offensive line, and I don't know any other person on the offensive side of the ball except for Jaden Daniels and Deebo Samuel. Defensively, I mean, I just think they're really, really well coached, and they do it with the players that they want. He has a system. He coaches that way. And for the Chargers, I'm going to take the Chargers. I'm not going to give them an excuse because they lost both of their tackles. You know what I mean? And they're hurt a lot with both of their tackles. And you can see that in the game today where Justin Herbert didn't have no time. When you lose Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt, that is a huge loss. Those are both of your bookend tackles. But I do think defensively, they're getting figured out. Because this is the second week in a row where they are playing that too high safety and still trying to stop the run. People are not going to let you do that. You know what I mean? They're going to run the ball. And when you start coming down with those safeties, they're going to start passing the ball. I think the Chargers defense is getting figured out. And I think they've been figured out because they play a lot of zone. They don't play a lot of man. When they do play a lot of man, their guys get beat. So I think they stick to a lot of zone coverage. And I think their defense is getting figured out because the first couple of weeks they were a team to be reckoned with. But these last couple of weeks, even with the Giants, they play a lot of zone, and that's how Jackson Dart moved the ball on them last week. They play a lot of zone. What do you do in the zone? You sit in the zone, and then when you go man, you're not gonna play zone on a lot of good quarterbacks. And today that proved it. They played zone, they sat. You played man, they played they played the crosser with Deebo or whoever. And they really have a hard time stopping the run when they have that too high safety look. That's why Krosky Merritt had a hell of a time because they want to keep those two safeties high. They don't want to give anything beat deep. And again, I think the Chargers defense is getting exposed a little bit because without them having, if they can't stop the run with the two safeties and they got to bring some safeties down, their guys aren't really good in man coverage. They're a zone team. And that's the only thing I can say about the Chargers. The Chargers are still a hell of a team, a well-coached team. But I just think that them playing that two safety high and still trying to stop the run is hard on anybody. But yeah, that was a little bit of a recap of week 5 for me. I have a video about my Raiders. Got 40 balled, of course. Go check that out. But yeah, this was another episode of Ahead of the Game Podcast. Don't forget to, like, subscribe. Make sure you comment. Love talking to you guys. Best time of the year. And yeah, go make sure you go check out my Raiders rant. It's a hell of a rant, and you will laugh. you will find some humor out of it. But again, this was another episode of Ahead of the Game Podcast. I'll see you guys on the next one.